Welcome, everybody. This is weekly highlight number 2 on the From Cameras to Couches podcast, and I am your host, Zach Davis.
And he's here with Emmy Davis, his co-host.
We're cooking up a storm with this one. Once again, voted upon by you guys, so thank you for participating. But we're going to be talking about old Europe today. We're going to be talking about nostalgia and the beauty of certain aspect ratios with our first entry from Mr. Wes Anderson, one that I don't feel that will be our last. But we're going to be talking about his potentially biggest film to date, the Grand Budapest Hotel, today. It
is his biggest success, and it is certainly his biggest success in our home. This is just
definitely.
It should be in every home. This is such a good movie.
This is my Wes Anderson gateway drug right here. So, little bit of a note at the top of this: we are going to be using some pretty heavy language as this persists, just to highlight some parts of the movie. It does have some relatively sexual explicit themes, so I recommend this one not being for the kiddies. Just prepare yourself. There's going to be some heavy stuff discussed, so just wanted to give a little disclaimer on that.
Trigger warning.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be talking about some stuff. We're also, again, going to be spoiling the movie. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, go ahead and check it out. It is 100% worth it. I've condensed my synopsis a little bit from last week's example with Howl's Moving Castle, kind of move through it a little bit quicker, so we'll go ahead and progress with it. But yeah, this is Wes Anderson's 2014 entry. He was just absolutely steaming along at this point. He'd been around since the early 90s with his debut film Bottle Rocket and its follow-up Rushmore, where he's exploring the indie scene a little bit. Goes into the more mainstream with stuff like Steve Zissou, and then just continues to hone his craft throughout the next several years. Coming to a peak in the mainstream, I would say, with The Fantastic Mr. Fox in 2012, and then just continuing, and he rode the hype train from this one, and it's an interesting property because you can see him maturing in real time between his earlier movies and this one. And The Royal Tenenbaums and things like that are kind of an examination of his looking at adulthood through the eyes of youth. This is flipping it around and looking at youth through the eyes of adulthood. Yeah, this is one of the best movies that he's ever made. I think it is certainly the most accessible movie.
It's one of my favorite movies ever made. I love this movie.
Just beautiful. It's amazing to look at. It's amazing to watch, listen to, and anything you could ask for.
Entertaining from front to back.
Absolutely. Truly. Yeah, this is definitely his magnum opus with a wide-spanning story and an ensemble cast. The cast list for this is just absolutely off the walls.
As are most Wes Anderson casts, I will say, but this one.
People are willing to take a dive on their salary just to participate in a Wes Anderson project, and he has definitely shown it with this one. So first and foremost, we've got Mr. Ray Fiennes in his best performance of his career. This man did not win an Oscar for this role. We'll get into that a little bit later, but he is absolutely smashing as Monsieur Gustave H., the concierge of the Grand Budapest Hotel. Followed closely by his second most screen time sharer, Tony Revolori, who plays Zero Mustafa in the film, Adrian Brody as Dimitri Disgofuntakis, Willem Dafoe as J.G. Jopling, Saoirse Ronan as Agatha, Jeff Goldblum as Deputy Kovacs, and it also stars F. Abram Murray, Tilda Swinton, Edward Norton, Matthew Almreich, Harvey Keitel, Tom Wilkinson, Jude Law, Bill Murray, Jason Schwartzman, Owen Wilson, and Léa Seydoux. There's just an absolute knockout cast going on in here.
What a powerhouse.
And really like a standard setting for a lot of the more younger people's careers in this. There's some returning characters from some of Wes's other movies.
This was Tony's breakout role, wasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think he was pretty well untrained by the time he got into this. And just to see how that untraining works really well with Ray Fiennes' classically trained actor, the way that they play off of each other, the way that Ray is able to improvise and stuff is awesome. But Wes is absolutely agonizingly precise with his filmmaking. Every shot is storyboarded well ahead of time, and through a monotonous creative process, he can accurately depict the creative images that he imagines, which is just probably the first and foremost most noticeable thing about Wes Anderson movies is that
they're just visually beautiful.
And this one focuses heavily on the artistry of the diorama. There's just some amazing practical things going on. And yeah, I absolutely love it. But the story of this was conceived by Wes in the early years of his career, moving through the 2000s, and it's inspired heavily by the writings of Stefan Zweig, an Austrian novelist who unfortunately took his life in the early 1940s after the breakout of World War II when he was living in Brazil. But he had some absolutely massive inspiration on this movie, the stories that are told, the characters that they develop, and it's really like a love letter to old Europe told through the eyes of nostalgia, if I say in the least. But yeah,
this is one of those movies that you watch and you want to be a part of. Undoubtedly. Like it's so interesting, and beautiful.
Sweeps you away.
Yeah.
So we'll get into the plot of this movie a little bit. Again, spoilers if you haven't checked this one out. So we open up in a graveyard in the fictional country of Zubroka. A young girl brings a book with her. It's the grave of an esteemed author whose name remains absent. She sits on the bench and opens the book, titled The Grand Budapest Hotel. This book, written in 1985, recounts the 1968 vacation of a young author as he visits the once beautiful but now sadly crumbling hotel. He meets the owner of this hotel, the legendary Zero Mustafa, who tells him his rags to riches story. Just before I go on, I just want to note, in these sequences, as it's opening the movie, the girl opens the book and it changes an aspect ratio going back into the 83. It changes it from, I think, to 185 when she opens the book. And when it moves from the author's oral recounting of how he's writing down his story into the 60s when he visited the hotel, shifts aspect ratio again to 240, and then shifts aspect ratio once again when Zero's telling his story. So it feels like a story within a story within a story, yeah, and it does a really good job of visualizing that. But anyway, on with the plot, and enough about the aspect ratio. In 1932, Zero is a refugee from a war waged by a fascist regime. He is hired to work as a lobby boy at the Grand Budapest, where he meets the esteemed concierge, Gustav H. Gustav is known for his affairs with many older women, including an aged dowager, Madame Céline Villeneuve des Goff und Taxis, or Madame D, as I will be referring to her as the rest of this podcast, and as they referred to her for the rest of the movie after the first initial drop of her full name. While he's had a 2-decade affair with this old woman, she is played by Tilda Swinton in old lady makeup, and honestly,
5 hours every single day worth of makeup, by the way.
Yeah, that was one of my half-assed internet research notes.
I have another one, and she was originally wanted for Angela Lansbury, but she was too busy doing Driving Miss Daisy on stage.
Yeah. Oh man, wow.
Yeah.
Tackle that, Colin Farrell. Sit in the chair and do your penguin makeup. Yeah. So he meets this lady, Madame D. A month after her last hotel visit, she mysteriously passes away, and Gustav and Zero visit her estate to offer condolences. While visiting, they find some suspicious activity among the staff, who ask Gustav not to show his face around the guests that are present while the will is being presented. Gustav and Zero find themselves in the room where the will is being presented, along with Deputy Kovacs, Madame D's lawyer, who is reading off the will.
Who's coincidentally the lawyer at the hotel.
And yes, and it's Jeff Goldblum.
In the movie.
Jeff Goldblum doing this. Yeah. See, what do you think about the will is when I take. Okay, enough of that. The other people present in the room are her son Dmitri, her 3 daughters, who are they almost are like the witches in Macbeth.
They are 100% like the witches in Macbeth. The makeup that is done on these women, they just look ghastly.
They look gaudy. Or ghastly, yeah, better word for it. It's really, this is where you start to see the differences in the color palette that Wes uses between the characters to signify different things.
Very apparent.
Most of the classes are signified differently by other palettes, like the working class, the service industry, which is the main frame of this film. Are depicted in like these matte colors, these pastel colors, and the older, richer crowd is usually depicted wearing all black at the end of a full focal length, stuff like that. But a little bit previous to this event, to going there, one thing that I forgot to note was that Zero and Gustav, on the way to Madame D's estate, are stopped on a train by a group of soldiers, seemingly German, who take Gustav's information down. They look at Zero's passport and decide that he is not eligible for leaving the country. But
they give him a worker's permit.
Yeah, Edward Norton steps in as somebody that has previously known Monsieur Gustav and gives them a pass to get out of the country. So then they go to the estate. Then they read the will. as they're reading the will, Deputy Kovacs reveals that he's received an urgent message from Madame D before her death, in which she bequeaths her prized possession and Renaissance painting, Boy with Apple, to Monsieur Gustave, instead of any member of her family.
I'm afraid that's me, darling.
I'm afraid that's me, darling. This leads to Dmitri having an absolute explosion. He refuses to accept the statement after some Wes Anderson banter and a few thrown punches. Gustave and Zero choose to take the painting without anybody knowing. Probably unwisely, they're left alone after this, and they package the painting up. And Serge, with the help of the maid and the butler. Yeah. Serge X, the butler, slips a letter into the packaging and does not have the time to tell Monsieur Gustave and Zero that he has done this very thing, but we'll get back to that later. So they go back to the Grand Budapest, they hide the painting in a safe, and the police show up, or the governing power shows up.
Edward Norton.
Gustave goes downstairs. He's told by Edward Norton that he's being convicted of the matter, or the murder of Madame D.
She's been murdered.
And you think I did
it? And then he immediately runs away.
Proceeds to run
one
away.
One of my favorite scenes.
It's so goofy. I love it. So yeah, after Serge X had made a testimony to them that Gustave was to be arrested for murder. Serge then disappears, supposedly in hiding. Gustave, while in jail, befriends a gang of ruffians who have made a plan to escape the prison. They successfully conduct a prison break by sneaking in tools disguised as pastries with the help of Zero and a young baker who he has taken up romantic interest in, Agatha. The guard inspecting the pastries as they're being sent to prison is like cutting through sausages and pieces of bread and all this kind of stuff. And he sees the pastries and looks at them and he's like, "This is art. Beautiful. I can't break it."
And I love that scene. That's one of my favorite scenes.
More on that later.
Yes.
Okay, so Deputy Kovacs, during this prison break, refuses to improperly turn over possession of Boy with Apple to Dmitri, and as a result, is killed by Dimitri's hitman, J.G. Jopling, who was played by Willem Dafoe. Awesome sequence, very Hitchcockian.
Did you just throw my cat out of a window?
Oh, no, I don't think so. Yeah, so he is killed. Now there is no legal recourse to anything that Dmitri does. As Gustave parts ways with his prison cohort and meets back up with Zero, they contact the Society of the Crossed Keys, a group of fellow concierges to Gustave. This
is another great sequence where we go from good actor to good actor to good actor in different settings and different hotels throughout the world. And this is also the only time that they refer to the concierges by their first name. Every other time it is Monsieur or Mr. Gustave or...
Yeah, and the cameos in here are non-ending. It's full of a bunch of Wes Anderson collaborators, Bill Murray, Owen Wilson, and they're just popping off.
And one of my favorite parts about this scene is the way that, I mean, we've already, at this point in the movie, you've seen how much of the duty of concierge is taken on by the lobby boy, and as this scene progresses and they have to go answer the phone, the lobby boys run up and take over like what they're doing to a T, and it's so good.
It's perfect. It's well trained. So yeah, they contact the Society of the Crossed Keys, who are able to facilitate a meeting between Serge, who is hiding up in the mountains, and Gustave, and they go to meet Miss Serge, and it's just an excellent sequence back and forth.
Through another series of wonderful events. This is just...
I can't spoil anything about this montage just because it rocks so hard. Serge, while giving them information, is able to tell them that there is a second will. He does not tell them where the second will is before he is murdered by Jopling. They give chase to Jopling in just an awesome diorama sequence where they're bobsledding after him. He's skiing. It's so fun.
Which is something we haven't mentioned enough in this synopsis, is how excellent and how frequent the diorama sequences are, and like Wes just does such a great job of
a lot of massively good practical effects.
Yes, and like in the most entertaining way. And obviously it's a diorama, but it's delightful.
It's
delightful.
Really a treat to look at. They're all like these beautifully painted.
This movie feels like you're eating one of those pastries that Agatha made.
Absolutely. Okay, so Jopling kills Serge. They give chase to Jopling. Jopling gets the upper hand on them and leaves Monsieur Gustave dangling off a cliff. Zero manages to push Jopling off of the cliff, killing him in just like an excellently shocking sequence. And then they go back to the Grand Budapest, but they're beginning to see like the start of this fascist invasion. And the fascists have completely taken over the state of the Grand Budapest. I mean, it's taken over by propaganda and a bunch of just ideology that does not mesh well. Agatha sneaks into the hotel to try to retrieve the painting, and she's noticed by Dimitri. He follows her. Zero rushes in to help. They find themselves in this huge gunfight that ends with Zero and Agatha hanging off of a balcony, about to fall several stories below. They do fall several stories below, but once they fall, they find the second copy of the second will, which was hidden in the painting. This is after the second
copy of the second will.
This is after she recovered the will, or the
painting with the will in the back. The painting this entire time has been covered by paper, so like the will hiding in the back, obviously, like has not been visible to any point until they fall off the balcony and the painting falls and it rips, and she sees the confidential envelope.
She opens the letter, everybody reads it aloud, and it reveals that Madame D was actually the owner of the Grand Budapest Hotel, and that she is leaving everything to Monsieur Gustave, who gave her such light in her elderly life. This makes Mr. Dimitri... Gustave is exonerated from any murder charge and makes Dimitri the primary suspect, but he immediately flees the country. Zero and Agatha get married. It's adorable. Beautiful. Gustave becomes one of like the richest guys in the country. As they're traveling out of the country by train one day, they're boarded by what can only be told as a German death squad. The squad interrogates Zero.
They're all wearing SS uniforms.
Yeah, it's actually ZZ uniforms.
Yes,
but
yeah.
It's pretty funny. Gustave steps in to defend Zero when they find that his paperwork is not up to par. They actually tear his passport in half. And Gustave is taken outside and shot and not shown. Very, very quick.
And very tastefully and heartbreakingly done. It just cuts and you just hear Zero, who's been narrating this whole thing as an older man, say, in the end, they shot him. And that's
gut-wrenching. And there's a really good still of all of the staff with Monsieur Gustave, all posing like they would pose for a painting. Just top-notch stuff. Gustave leaves everything to Zero. He put in his will that he was executing everything to Zero. So it's bequeathed to Zero. Zero now owns the hotel. Moving back to the late 1960s, Zero tells the author that he should keep the hotel in memory of his beloved Agatha, who
passed away mere months into their marriage, along with their son.
Yeah, they died of sickness.
So just really sad end to this beautiful, fun movie. Just all of a sudden you're crying and you're like, oh, where did that come from?
Yeah, so Zero's wife and child are dead, and that's it. It leaves you with this kind of somber feeling. And then as they're closing out of the movie, the author is giving his closing thoughts on his meeting with Zero and how it affected him. And, it shifts back from the 60s, back to the 80s, back to the girl closing the book on the graveyard. The end. It's a good one. It's top-notch stuff.
That's how I feel every time I finish that movie. And it's still one of my favorite movies. It is so powerful, poignantly told, and... just a glorious thing to behold.
Yeah.
What a rhyme I've just made.
It's interesting how... You're spitting bars.
Thank you.
It's interesting how
quitting
thematic...
the podcast business and becoming a rapper.
Yeah. Don't do that.
I might.
The podcast business is apparently far easier than being a rapper.
Hey, I'm just talking into this thing and people are listening, apparently. Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thank you for
Quick
listening this far. Okay, so... we love this movie. Obviously, we want to tell you a little bit about why we love it. So,
this was one of the movies that got me into movies.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was my gateway drug to Wes Anderson. I think this is the first time I ever saw a Wes Anderson film. A lot of people were introduced to him through his more not child-centered, but just easier themed stuff like Fantastic Mr. Fox, which is also just an excellent movie. But he was really stewing with this one. He went a little mainstream, and it paid off big time. And I think that it is just as effective as a mainstream movie.
And it's incredibly accessible too.
Absolutely,
like, this is something I would feel comfortable recommending to anyone.
Yeah, there is some sexual content in this. There's some pretty graphic.
Any adult.
It's definitely like a put the kids to bed kind of movie. But it is eminently quotable. It's so perfectly made, so carefully crafted and planned without like one piece feeling out of place. It is all just thoroughly this vision that he came up with. Back to Ralph Fiennes. This is possibly the best performance of the 2010s. It's certainly the best performance of Ralph Fiennes' career.
Ralph Fiennes, if you don't know, also played Voldemort in the later Harry Potter movies. So if you recognize him, that's what it is, most
That's
likely.
who he is.
He's also in Made in Manhattan.
Minus the nose. So he's just absolutely cooking in this one. He's got this like bisexual flamboyance to him throughout the whole movie, which they reference a couple of times. He never does anything openly homosexual in this movie, but it's referenced several times, and it's kind of assumed that he is bisexual. But the way that he conducts himself is just top notch. I think that it provides for some perfect moments of class and hilarity with a little bit of snidiness to it.
He's just gauche and charming.
He literally has a favorite perfume that is called L'air de Panache. Of course, play on the words Air of Panache. But it's just
and it's his obsession throughout the movie. Like, there's a point where when Zero breaks him out of prison, Zero admits to forgetting the L'air de Panache, and he's like, "Do you know how humiliating this is? I've been in prison. I stink." And it's just so great. He's just so 100% made to play this character. And
absolutely.
If anybody else was playing this character, it wouldn't work this well. Because this is just Ralph Fiennes' role.
Yeah, and this ultimately is a comedy in a lot of ways.
100%.
It is more comedy than drama, but it kind of falls into both. But the comedy in it is just rapid fire. Like every quote from this is something that will stick with you. I think that the jokes come quickly and stay fresh every time.
You'll be giggling.
It's so great. So let's talk about some themes in this movie. The first thing that I had down was a world forgotten and remembered. Nostalgia is a massive factor of this movie. Anderson puts a high premium on this glossy, mannerized, high-class world that Gustav lives in and for. He categorizes as nostalgia within the characters. Each one is yearning and perpetuating this illusion of time where they don't belong, through romanticizing the past. And
that's even mentioned at the end of the movie in Zero's monologue. He says something about how Gustav
was a man from a time that didn't exist anymore.
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
People have theorized that the nonlinear format in which the story is told is a reflection of human memory in the way that we remember certain sequences of our lives, the way that we shut down when something reminds you of something sad that comes later. It's just top notch.
There's a really beautiful scene where Zero is talking as an older man to the author, and he kind of shuts down for a second, like you said, and he just takes a second and gets upset because he's about to start talking about Agatha, and it's like this really beautiful moment that just really emphasizes how much he cared about this person and how difficult it is for him to trudge it up.
His sadness is apparent in every sentence he speaks about her. We move from a young girl at the intro, reading a book and dreaming of a long lost time in her own country, to an author jotting down his memories of a particularly important visit to a hotel, to a man reflecting on the troubles and wonders of his youth. And each time we change these perspectives, we are greeted with a more colorful and beautiful, but more distilled and romanticized version of reality. And it's just, I mean, you've all listened to stories that your grandpa has told you, and the way that, you know, they either romanticize or don't those ideas of you know, what we used to be and all these things. But ultimately, what we used to be is an individual experience, and for us to put that onto somebody and say, this is what the experience was, is not valuable. It's not fair. So it's just a really good examination of how we view our past, how we view nostalgia, all these things. It's awesome. I think that's my favorite thematic thing in the movie. It's the most bold one, and it's very clearly Anderson, you know, taking a different look on things that he does. I think he makes the shift with Fantastic Mr. Fox, where he does this from the perspective of Mr. Fox, who's just kind of waltzing his way through life and realizing that he doesn't want to live in a hole anymore. But Anderson's projecting himself onto that character, and that's like his first sign of maturity in situations like these, and then he moves on to the Grand Budapest Hotel.
He deals a lot with themes of maturity and childhood and stuff like that. That's kind of one of his niches, I think, especially in his earlier filmmaking days leading up to Grand Budapest Hotel. Yeah. I mean, Moonrise Kingdom and Royal Tenenbaums, and
famously a man that has a pretty complex relationship with his father, and a lot of that shows in his work. Moving on to theme number 2 I have down, which is World War II. While the characterizations of military power are fictionalized in this film, along with their countries, the reflection is fairly obvious. Nazi Germany is an omnipresent force in this, most obviously with their takeover of the Budapest and execution of Gustav at the end of the film. There's Jewish representation in this in the form of Deputy Kovacs, who's treated pretty poorly. Zero is treated extremely poorly as somebody whose country had been invaded and disrupted by these fascists. And they look upon him as less than human, which is just, that unfortunately was the way of
Zero,
way of
and
World War II.
He famously, at the very beginning of the movie, discusses having 0 family, 0 education, 0 job experience.
Zero's paperwork is under scrutiny in 2 crucial parts of this. The first time is when they're traveling to Madame D's
for the will
reading. And they recognize him as a refugee of the war that they waged in his homeland, and disregards human rights completely. The first time, Gustav steps in and defends Zero to the best of his ability, but is assisted by the late arrival of Edward Norton, a young commander whose mother Gustav used to court.
Hankels?
I think so. Yeah, I think Henkel. Yeah. The commander offers a letter of sanction for Zero, showing like the last bit of kindness and light in this increasingly dark world that's falling into the World War. The second time, when all the light has disappeared into the World War, Gustav does not hesitate to defend Zero from injustice again, and this time it costs Gustav everything. His life, everything, which he then leaves to Zero. It does not explain how Zero makes it out of the situation, but, it doesn't need to. It gets its point across pretty well.
Which we also didn't mention when we were doing the synopsis, but there's a point in the movie where they're traveling in a train car, and they're sitting in bunk beds, and they do write up a will after they have obtained Boy with Apple. And he says that he's going to leave Zero. Everything, where do they say that they're going to run away to? Like
somewhere with a beach.
Somewhere in like Greece or like something like that.
Yeah. They're like, let's just go live on the water.
They just
want
to get away.
I think I want to sell it.
But also,
yeah,
it's just a beautiful story about friendship, which
is the big third theme of this.
Yeah, I mean,
friendship and loyalty.
The mentor-mentee relationship, which is just always such a beautiful thing to be shown on a screen, because you see so much of them mentoring each other.
Yeah.
And changing each other, and
when Gustav dies, it's the spirit of the hotel dies. The spirit of everything that he stood for in this, as
no
Zero
matter
says
how
at
much
the end
Zero
of the movie.
tries to carry it on, but he doesn't have the flamboyancy and the joie de vivre that Gustav has.
Yeah, and the way that Zero calculates this at the end of the movie is that the very thing that Gustav was living for, this class, this taste, all disappear, and maybe we're never there to begin with. He's living for a time that doesn't really exist anymore, and when he dies, that time is lost. And Zero says that he keeps the hotel in memory of his relationship with Agatha, not for Gustav, because realistically, the hotel is never the same after Gustav dies. In the 80s sequences, it's shown to be a very drab.
Not in shambles, but it's not when you cut from the 80s to
back to the 30s.
30s, it's vastly different, and there's so much grandeur to it, and it really is the Grand Budapest Hotel instead of just that hotel.
The coloration of it is so smart. The lighting of it is so smart. It just continues, like I said earlier, to show you these more exciting, beautiful ideas as we recollect our memories. Because, I mean, which one of you can't look back on your childhood and find something that made you happy, and you see that in a different light than you saw any other moment in your childhood? Gustav's nobility is just top-notch. I mean, it's interesting to see how I was listening to the Rewatchables podcast on the Grand Budapest Hotel earlier, which if you like Grand Budapest, you have to listen to. It is
also
top-notch
just quick
stuff.
shout out to Rewatchables. A lot of our inspiration.
Yeah, truly. Sean Fennessy on the Rewatchables was talking about how Gustav is this representation of this thing, and he is forever perpetuated in the book that the girl is reading as this character of nobility, of honor. But realistically, he was, not necessarily the best guy, but he had his honor code. He just, he loved older ladies.
Yeah, I go to bed with all my friends.
Yeah, that's a lot of what I want to discuss in the themes here. Just stuff to note if you're rewatching this or watching it for the first time. Those are all things that I think are important coming out of this movie. Okay, we're gonna move on to favorite scenes now. There are like
the whole movie. That's my favorite.
A total
scene.
of like this movie moves in chapters, sequences, and scenes subsequently. And some of the sequences are hard to distinguish from the scenes. Like I have down the opening sequence leading into the first shot of the 1930s. It's just a great sequence of
as we already described, with the little girl to the author to Zero telling a story, and you're back in the 1930s all of a sudden. And it just was so well done and like not confusing, and
it's like descending a staircase. I mean,
yes.
You're really just being brought into the story. Gustav and Zero visit the estate, particularly the reading of the will, from which come some quotes that are very harsh. We'll discuss some of those later, but ultimately are just like some of the best things.
Yes.
Such good banter between two characters. Zero's first train ride is another one that I noted. It's actually the scene previous to the visit to the estate, which is where Edward Norton comes in and provides this last little bit of kindness.
Yes, and I love this performance in this scene from him, because he's just, you see the harshness of the soldiers that come in before, and then he enters
slamming them into the walls,
just, and like he just has this soft spot in his heart for Mr. Gustav, because he knew him when Edward Norton was a child, and he
supposedly when Monsieur Gustav was courting his older mother.
Yeah, probably. But he just recognized the kindness that was shown to him and repays that kindness, and I think that's just a beautiful human thing.
The next scene that I have on the list is the prison escape.
I have specifically the tools being snuck in, which we already mentioned, but I just love how the guard hesitates after slicing through all these things, different directions and stuff like that. So it's not a question of whether or not he thinks he thinks that it could have, I lost my train of thought a little bit there, but just not wanting to destroy something beautiful, and he just has no hesitation and lets it move on.
I just love like Harvey Keitel in this sequence.
So good.
Awesome. And Mr. Wolf is back. Big time.
I have a fun fact about that later that I cannot wait to bring up.
Yeah. I think we have the same one.
Probably. I'm glad we brought the fun facts back.
The next scene I have on my favorites is the Society of the Crossed Keys, which is just a montage of them ringing up other members of other hotels around the world to try and set up this meeting with Serge X. And it includes Bill Murray, it includes Owen Wilson. There's just so many good faces in this sequence, and it's just a nice little cameo sequence.
And at the very end of it, I love the shot of Gustav and Zero sitting on the hay bale in the snowy field.
Yeah. And that whole sequence coalesces into the series of events that it takes them to get to Serge X, which is just
up in the monastery,
just hilarious,
and so well soundtracked too.
Definitely.
And that's something else that I think we're probably going to talk about later. But soundtrack for this movie, best
score winner. This soundtrack
it deserved.
This movie didn't win nearly as many awards as it deserved, but it certainly deserved that one. My last one that I have, I mean, I could talk about these all day, but I'm just trying to highlight stuff. But in the end, they shot him. I think that is just like needle drop. Everybody, shut up. We're getting serious now, and it just drops this hammer on you, and you're like, oh my god, what am I supposed to do now?
I just along the same lines of like quick delivered lines that just like have a lot of poignancy to them, and I guess this is not as poignant as that, obviously, but I love the scene where it's going through him and Agatha's relationship, and it's the shot of them in the theater, and he says, will you marry me? And she goes, yes, before he can even get the words out, and then she just tackles him in a kiss, and it is just so cute, and I love it.
Young love,
just infatuation
and nostalgia through which we view it through.
Beautiful. I love that scene.
Yeah. Did you have any other scenes that you wanted to note?
Okay.
Everything.
In case we haven't, I know we mentioned Saoirse Ronan being in this movie, but she plays Agatha, Zero's love interest, and I love Saoirse Ronan. I delight in every single role she is in, and I love all the sequences in the bakery. I love the sequence where she's in the elevator with Dimitri, and he looks down and he rips a part of the paper off the picture, and he says, "Pretty picture," and he is so intimidating in that scene, which is something again that I wanted to mention earlier. The height of his hair in this movie, and just like
it's just how he shoots him. He shoots him like an intimidated, like walking down the hall slowly with his hands clasped behind his back.
Tall and daunting, and yes,
good bit of soundtrack there too, where it's cutting back and forth between Saoirse Ronan and Saoirse's, when it's showing her like timidly running through the halls, it's very quiet and
when she
low
turns the corner, just sprints. I love
and
that.
And then it cuts back to Dimitri, and it's just this huge bombastic villainous score. It's awesome stuff. I love it.
All the strings and
it's just
so good,
just well made. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and talk about the soundtrack. This soundtrack absolutely rocks. It's got this distinct European style that goes between choral and acoustic, and it's just got these beautiful strings that open up the movie, and then it just moves into like this really really big bold movement.
And it's like very distinct for Wes Anderson too, and this is a man that found his niche and
sure.
absolutely kills it.
He's sitting on his porch smoking a pipe in a tweed jacket and just hanging out. He's just a dude from Texas.
Every Wes Anderson movie you watch, you're like, you could
authentically his.
Yes. There could never be any doubt that it is a Wes Anderson movie.
Certainly. So yeah, the soundtrack won Best Score at the Oscars. This movie was actually nominated for 9 Oscars and won 4. Best Makeup, Best Production Design, I can't remember what the other one is, and
Best
Score. And I'll say it until the day I die. The other nominees for Best Lead Actor this year were Steve Carell in Foxcatcher, Eddie Redmayne in The Theory of Everything. Who were the other two? Bradley Cooper in American Sniper as Chris Kyle, which is an excellent performance, and I think would have been the anything to stand
worthy
on.
of a nomination.
And Ray Fiennes in this role, which I think is just truly one of the best performances in a
well, then, and
time.
Also, wasn't it Michael Keaton and Birdman that
yes,
won?
Yes, yeah, Michael Keaton and Birdman. Michael Keaton and Birdman did not win. Eddie Redmayne won for The Theory of Everything, which is the stupidest thing in human history. I think that is so dumb. So unbelievably dumb. Okay, let's talk about some favorite quotes.
I love, an older Zero, who is referred to as Mr. Mustafa, but he's referred to as by his full name, because he's an adult now. He's a grown-up man.
He's grown up and rather rich one.
No, the owner of this hotel. He's describing Gustav H., and he's saying that he, by the way, was the most liberally perfumed man I had ever encountered. The scent announced his approach from a great distance and lingered for many minutes after he was gone. And I think that is just so telling about Gustav, because I think that just encapsulates his character so well. His, not just his smell, but his presence. You can sense him coming. You can sense his presence after he's left. He just is such a big character and such a big personality, and takes up so much room that he lingers.
There's a point early in the movie where Monsieur Gustave is giving some culture lessons to Zero, in which he says, "You see, there are still faint glimmers of civilization left in this barbaric slaughterhouse that was once known as humanity. Indeed, that's what we provide in our own modest, humble, insignificant..." Oh, fuck it.
I love that line.
And
he just
at the end
gives up on his monologue. He's like, I'm just gonna be... it's almost...
To contrast that, at the end of the movie, Zero refers to him as a glimmer of civilization left in this barbaric slaughterhouse that was once known as humanity. He says there are faint glimmers of civilization left, and he was one of them. Just cool to see him twisting, or not even twisting, but just using his words to describe himself. another one that I've got is when Monsieur Gustave is visiting Madame de in her corporeal form, and he says, "You're looking so well, darling. You really are. They've done a marvelous job. I don't know what sort of cream they've put down you at the morgue, but I want some."
I want some. I love that too.
so great.
Still risen up the ladies after they're dead.
It's so great.
I love it.
Oh, and you fixed your nails.
The aforementioned. Did you just throw my cat out the window?
Yeah, Jeff Goldblum.
Just such a casual.
Best line delivery in the movie, which is saying a lot.
And then there's also, as I mentioned previously, the whole encounter between Zero and Monsieur Gustave after Monsieur Gustave breaks out of prison with the perfume, and he's like, "Do you know how humiliating this? I've been in jail, Zero. I stink." And I smell, that's what he says. I smell. I love that so much. Good. He's so upset.
Previous to that, Monsieur Gustave is in prison, and he's going back and forth with some of the guys about their plans for the escape. And one of the guys says, "Me and the boys talked it over. We think you're a really straight fellow." And Monsieur Gustave says, "Well, I've never been accused of that before, but I appreciate the sentiment." Just hilarious. I just think that stuff is unbelievably well characterized. For how much of a character he is, he has to have these kind of retorts.
Yes, because he always does. That's his thing. He's witty, he's quick, he's
just, oh my god,
entertaining.
And then I have, I think, the penultimate one, and unless we both have it, so
let me just say one more because I really do love it, and it's when, again, it's directly following the perfume I smell, but Gustave is asking about Agatha, and Zero starts quoting this poetry he's been writing for her, which Gustave inspired him to do. He says, "Very good. I'm going to stop you there because the alarm has sounded, but remember where we left off because I insist you finish later." And I love it. I love the poetry he says for her. I think it's like,
To compare you to a summer's eve.
'Twas first light.
'Twas first light.
'Twas first light when I saw her face upon the hearth.
I'm going to stop you there.
Hence did I return day by day, entranced till vinegar did brine my heart. Never. I'm going to stop you there.
Oh, man, it's so great.
He's just the recitation and the quick snap into it and his face. I love it. I just love that part.
Oh, it's so good. Very good mentor-mentee moment. Yes. And perhaps the number one quote to come out of this movie, one that we say all the time in this household. Say it with me. "Take your hands off my lobby boy." That's my take your hands off my lobby boy. Oh my god, I love it so much. It's so great. Okay, that's favorite quotes. Let's move on to It Must Be True. This is our half-assed internet research part. I think we both have the same ones. We probably do.
Can I start?
Yeah.
Okay, so the role of Zero was Wes Anderson wanted an unknown Arabic actor for this, and he had a hard time finding one. He ended up with two potential actors from Guatemala, one of which being Tony Ravolori, who ended up playing Zero, and the other being his brother Mario.
Oh.
Yeah. So it was down to two brothers. Two brothers.
My first one was the scene with Harvey Keitel.
42 takes?
Yeah, this is 42 takes of Harvey Keitel smacking Zero in the face and saying, "Good luck, kid." They did it 42 times, and each time Harvey Keitel really smacked Zero, which I personally think is an honor. I would pay a good amount of money to be smacked in the face 42 times by Harvey Keitel, but nature of the beast. Did you have we already talked about
I said 5 hours on Tilda Swinton's makeup, which is, gosh, although the character is a very important one in this movie, the role is not terribly big.
Not at all.
And 5 hours worth of makeup for a small role is, hey, Tilda Swinton, I love you. I've loved you since you were the White Witch. I think you're amazing.
She's great.
You're top notch.
Okay, final category before we get to the conclusion, but entertaining and enlightening are both. Oh wait, what do you got?
Not final category. This one I had a deep dive for, but Annie Atkins, the graphic designer for this movie, misspelled a word on the Mendel's package. One of the words, I think it meant paste. It's the French word for pastry, if I'm not wrong. And they had to fix it in post. They had to go over all the Mendel's packages, which, watch the movie, there's a lot of them, and fix the word Big ol' mess
Just
up.
add another year onto the production
Sorry,
time.
Annie. That was from an interview with her.
Sorry, Wes. Wes
Yeah,
was
sorry,
probably like,
Wes.
are you shitting me?
Well, hey, there's that AI video of him freaking out over this. It's not symmetrical enough.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, entertaining and enlightening are both.
Yes.
I found that initially, when I watched this movie for the first time, I found this to be vastly more entertaining than enlightening.
I would agree. It's certainly, I mean, we talked about Howls last week, which is so enlightening. And this is enlightening in a different, more mellow way. I think it's more leaning towards entertainment, but it disguises the enlightenment so well.
Definitely. So as I've gotten older, I have definitely come to terms with the enlightenment of this a lot more. I personally still find it to be a little bit more entertaining than enlightening, but solely from the experience of a general audience. If you choose to read this movie from the more complex perspective of Anderson's vision and direction, you will definitely leave more enlightened.
This is something you can watch just to watch, or if you are like us and you want to dig into every little bit of this movie, there is a lot to dig into.
It's a good one. It's top-notch stuff. So, all right, in conclusion, watch this damn movie.
Watch the movie. Watch the movie.
I give it a 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. It's a perfect movie.
I think
it is one of my favorite movies. I've said it a million times already tonight, and I'll say it another one.
The most full and realized vision of Wes Anderson's mantra, his credo, to say in one way.
I cry every time. I think it's so touching. I think it's so fun. Just a blast. Just a great way to spend 2 hours?
Yeah, about 2 hours and 15 minutes, I think. Best double feature. I picked The Fantastic Mr. Fox in honor of all the young parents out there who want to watch something before they put their kids to bed, and then put their kids to bed and watch the Grand Budapest Hotel. I think that is just as good as it gets. And also, The Fantastic Mr. Fox is just awesome in general, so you'll enjoy it even if you don't have kids.
I have The Fantastic Mr. Fox as well as The Life Aquatic of Steve Zissou, or The Aquatic Life of Steve Zissou. Life Aquatic. I had it right the first time. I have those as my, if you liked that, you'll like this. But for my double feature, I just put this down because it's kind of along the same lines of dealing with World War II themes, comedy, and just some difficult stuff, but also a fun watch. Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah,
definitely. I think that matches well. I think that'd be a fun back-to-back.
Yeah, it will definitely be a fun back-to-back. As far as
bright colors.
Yeah,
fun.
Yeah, definitely.
Sad.
It'll hit all of the right marks if you're looking for the right things. Yeah, I had if you like that, you'll like this, The Life Aquatic and The Royal Tenenbaums. I think The Royal Tenenbaums is weirdly enough, as I've been talking about Wes and how he matures, The Royal Tenenbaums is a very mature movie, but it presents itself from a very young perspective. Even though a lot of the main characters, including Royal Tenenbaum, the titular character, the dad of this family, are well realized older people. I think the kids are definitely the main. Well,
they're all stuck in a state of immaturity too. I mean, they're all in that.
And
childlike.
A lot of what Wes was sympathizing with in those early years. Yeah. Okay, I think that's about it. Do you have anything else?
I think that concludes my Grand Budapest Hotel ramble. I love that movie.
It's top notch. Go watch it. Go watch it right now.
Go watch those sweet, sweet pink and purple colors flitter across your screen. I beg of you.
It's beautiful. It's gorgeous.
Look at those little dioramas.
Yeah. So we'll
kiss.
We'll be back around with our weekend roundup this week. Now this weekend is pretty quiet. There's not a whole lot going on this weekend. The big showcase is here. The Robert Zemeckis Tom Hanks movie. I talked about that a little bit on our weekend roundup earlier this week. I'll be checking that one at some point this weekend.
I would also, I'll probably at some point this week and discuss it on the Weekend Roundup, Anna Kendrick's directorial debut that came out on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it, but I know that's about serial killers. I think it's a woman escaping a serial killer or something like that. But we'll find out on the Weekend Roundup because I'm going to watch it.
I hear it's pitch perfect.
Hey!
See what I did there?
Hey!
I want to talk about, since we don't have a lot to go see this weekend, I'm going to highlight some things that we saw just at home this week. I checked out John Carpenter's The Thing last night for the first time in years. Absolutely 5-star movie. I'm going to talk about that a little bit next week, and who knows, we might check out some stuff just over the course of the week that we'll bring back and report to you on. But in the meantime, I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you for listening this far, and
thank you guys.
Yeah, we'll be back around for round 3 next week for the weekend highlight or the weekly highlight and weekend roundup.
Bring us suggestions.
Number 3.
Vote in the polls.
We'll be around.
Please go vote in the polls on our story, and go vote in the polls in real life.
Yeah, go exercise your right. It is the time to do just
Early
that.
voting's open.
The gates are open. But anyway, that's all from us. Thank you guys.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.